Welcome. Tonight we sail into the quiet shadows of one of history's most fabled journeys, but not as the stories usually tell it. Life aboard Magellan's ship was not heroic. It was hardtack and hunger, aching limbs and silent prayers. In the still heat of the Visayan shore, another world waits, measured by fireside conversations, careful rituals, and the gentle unfolding of trust. And when it all ends, it ends not with fanfare, but with the soft breaking of waves and the firm stance of those defending their land. If you're listening in from a quiet corner of the world, I'm glad you're here. Feel free to share your part of the map and what kind of day brought you to this moment. And if these stories offer a little stillness, you're always welcome to return. The tides of the past are wide, and there are many more to explore.
You wake before the sun, not because of any command, but because of the creaking. It's always there, low, persistent, the sound of old timber shifting under wind and weight. Above you, sails groan like tired lungs, and the ropes, stiff with salt, snap softly against the masts. Below, the hull groans in its sleep, holding the sea back just enough to keep you dry. Just enough. Your hammock smells of mildew. So does your shirt. So does your breath. The air is damp, always, and your skin itches under the places where sweat has dried into layers of grime. There is no privacy, only shared breath, shared coughing, and the low muttering of men whose patience has frayed with the months. You slept, perhaps, but not well. Dreams aboard ship are never gentle. You roll from your sling and brace against the sway. The floor beneath you tilts, then settles. You've learned to move with it, to keep your balance without thinking. The light that seeps through the cracks is grey, thin and filtered through morning mist. Somewhere above, the cook is ladling out something that passes for food. It will be hard bread, it will be fish if there's any left, and water. Not fresh, but flat and stored too long in barrels that once held wine. You chew slowly, your jaw already tired. The biscuit is hard, and you soften it with a sip of water that tastes faintly of smoke and dust. Some of the men add vinegar, others just spit and move on. You hear the murmur before you see the sky. Land is near again. Another island, another stretch of green rising from the sea, shaped by mist and sun, and the cautious hope of something better. There have been so many islands, some large, some small, some friendly, some not. They blend together in your memory, stitched by the rhythm of waves and the slow change in air. You climb to the deck slowly, the ladder slick underfoot. The breeze greets you with the smell of salt, of wet wood, of bodies pressed too close for too long. And beneath it, something new, a faint sweetness, the scent of leaves, of smoke from distant fires, of something human ashore. You shield your eyes. The island ahead is low, ringed with trees and fringed with narrow beaches. A few boats wait near the shore, slim, carved, unfamiliar in shape. Figures move across the beach, small at this distance, watching. Someone calls from Magellan. His silhouette appears by the tiller, his cloak still, his voice low. He's quieter now than he was in Spain, more measured, more tired. You wonder if he still believes in everything he once said, about glory, about God, about the westward path to all the spices in the world. But he gives orders anyway. And the men move, as always, not because of belief, but because they must. You begin preparing the landing skiff. Rope is coiled, barrels are secured, and weapons are checked. Not raised, just kept close. You look at your boots, split along the sole. They'll be filled with sand before the hour is over. You take a breath and watch the coastline draw nearer. You don't know what you'll find there, but you've learned to not expect much. Only that the land will be warm, the people different, and the sky wide above you, as it always is. The boat rocks gently beneath you. You sit low, knees bent, one hand wrapped around the side rail. The sea between ship and shore is quiet, too quiet for comfort. No breeze stirs the water. It laps lazily against the hull, thick and green, hiding whatever might lie beneath. The oars dip in and out with practiced rhythm, carving slow circles into the surface. Beside you, another man hums under his breath. It isn't a tune you recognize. It might not be a tune at all, just a sound to keep his mind from slipping into the long quiet that lives between each pull of the oar. You can't see his face, but you know it well by now. That narrow look of calculation, of faith struggling to become certainty. He holds a cross in one hand, a gift in the other. Someone nearby clutches a flag, furled and damp with salt. You land in the shallows. Boots sink into warm sand. The water reaches your knees, soaking the hem of your worn tunic. You move slowly, purposefully. The heat is immediate, rising from the shore in gentle waves that wrap around your shoulders like a wet cloth. There are words exchanged, halting, translated, misunderstood. One of the interpreters speaks something close to the local tongue. Gifts are offered, a mirror, some beads, a small cross. A pig is brought forth in return. Laughter is shared, though you do not know the joke. They invite Magellan to sit. He does. A mat is rolled out beneath him. Coconut water is offered in carved bowls. Someone gestures to a woven shelter nearby, indicating a meal to come. Children gather in the distance, peeking from behind their mothers. No one raises their voice. You stand behind the others, watching. The sun climbs higher, pressing sweat. The meeting stretches into hours. Magellan speaks through interpreters, his tone even, his gaze steady. He gestures to the sky often, toward the sun, toward the heavens. He makes the sign of the cross as he talks, not angrily, not forcefully,
but often a rhythm more than a message. You've seen it before, on other shores, with other chiefs. Sometimes it's met with curiosity, other times with blank stares. The locals here seem polite. They nod, they offer food, they touch the gifts with careful fingers, but you notice what is not said. There is no kneeling, no declarations, just soft looks, measured replies, smiles that flicker too quickly. Behind them, the village stands quiet. Roofs of nipah palm, chickens scuttling between posts, the scent of boiling root vegetables, something sour and warm. It could be home, in another world, and yet it isn't. It never is. A priest begins to set up a small altar. A cloth is spread over a rock, a crucifix planted into the soil. Mass will be held at dusk. You already know the form of it, the muttered Latin, the slow lifting of bread, the bowing of heads. You'll take part as always, because belief is part of the expedition just as much as the compass, just as much as the sword. You wonder what the villagers think as they watch the ceremony begin. Do they see worship or spectacle? Do they feel the reverence, or only the strangeness of it, the foreign chants, the wooden figure nailed to a tree? Magellan kneels first. Others follow. The crew arranges themselves in uneven lines. A hymn is sung, low and strained. The sun begins to fall behind the trees, casting long shadows across the clearing. The air is still. Even the insects pause. For a moment, the world seems hushed. Holy, perhaps, or maybe just tired. You bow your head and close your eyes, not out of certainty, but because it's what you've always done. When the mass ends, the locals bring more food, a roasted bird, some flatbread made from something like cassava, sweet.
Before there were ships, before there were names like Magellan or Spain or Christ, before the foreign flags and silver coins and the sound of boots in the shallows, there were mornings like this. The light arrives slowly, hearsed in the leaves, catching on dew, then across the rooftops of woven palm, then on the sea, where the tide pulls gently against the posts of moored boats. A rooster calls in the distance. Someone coughs nearby. The day begins not with a trumpet, but with a breath.
You rise from a bamboo sleeping platform, brushing the last threads of dreams from your eyes. Your blanket is folded away. Your hands move without thinking, gathering firewood, stirring ash, shaking out rice for boiling. The hearth is cold, but the coals buried deep still hold warmth. You coax them gently to life, adding kindling slowly, until the flame rises with a soft hiss. Others stir in nearby homes. Children's feet slap against packed earth. A pot is set to boil with water pooled from a nearby well. Your ears tune to the sounds of morning, birds calling, leaves rustling, the crackle of firewood, the faint splash of paddles beyond the trees. This is not a grand city. It is a barangay, small, intimate, and woven into the shoreline. Homes on stilts, trails through the jungle, a central clearing where elders sit to speak. Everything moves at its own pace, fast when it must be, slow when it can be. You step outside and stretch. The air is warm already, humid, but it was pleasant. The scent of wood smoke, sea water, and ripe mangoes lingers in the breeze. A basket of rice is ready to be pounded. A canoe waits near the shore for fishing. You know the rhythm of the day before it even starts. In the distance, beyond the green line of trees, a shape moves on the water, large, wooden, too tall for a local boat. Someone has seen it already. A child points. Another runs to fetch one of the elders. The shape draws closer. Its sails stiffen in the wind. But for now, it is still far off, and your hands are still busy in the morning.
By midday, the ship is closer. Not just one, but several. Dark hulls, creaking slowly toward the shore. Tall masts, strange cloth sails, the glint of metal. You've never seen boats like these, not even the traders from the west, or the occasional Chinese junk with its curved deck and broad hull. These are different, taller, hungrier. The elders are already meeting beneath the shade of a woven canopy. Chief Humabon sits cross-legged, his hands clasped, his chin still. Others speak softly and turn. Women listen nearby, some weaving, some holding baskets not yet emptied from the morning's work. No one is panicked, but no one is relaxed either. This is not the first stranger. The winds bring them from time to time. Malay sailors, Javanese traders, Muslim emissaries from the southern islands. You have heard stories passed down of men with silver blades and feathered hats, of merchants who speak in riddles, of warriors who burn villages and offer prayers after. There are always stories. This feels different. The boats anchor near the shore. A smaller one is lowered. Oars dip. Foreign men approach, pale-skinned, covered in cloth and metal, some with beards, some bareheaded. They speak to one another in harsh, clipped words you do not understand. A figure in front raises a hand, not a weapon, just a greeting. The interpreter speaks, a man who knows your language barely. He has been traveling with them. He bows low and announces that they come in peace, that they seek food, shelter, and perhaps friendship, that the man in front is a great captain named Magellan, and that he brings with him gifts and a new god.
Humabon steps forward. His voice is calm. He welcomes the travelers to Cebu, offers food, and asks nothing yet. His face does not betray much. His eyes, though, do not leave Magellan's. You notice the objects exchanged: mirrors, beads, cloth, copper tools, thin threads of silver. But also something else. A small wooden figure. A man, nailed to a post. It is held up reverently, then kissed. A sign is made across the body, the shape of a cross. You've never seen this before. You are not afraid, not exactly, but something in you resists it. You look at the others. Some are curious, some confused, some look away. A meal is shared. Bananas, roasted fish, sweet water from young coconuts. The foreigners eat carefully, watching. They smile when spoken to, though they do not always seem to understand. They laugh too loudly. They stare too long. You sit near the edge of the gathering, observing. These men move differently. Their skin is tired. Their clothes are too heavy. They seem displaced, as if they are not sure whether they've arrived at their destination or drifted somewhere they were never meant to land. Later, when the guests leave to return to their ships, the village does not exhale all at once. There is no relief, only a quiet pause. The next morning comes the same as before. Light through the leaves, smoke rising from hearths, the splash of nets cast into shallow water. But the feeling has changed. There is something underneath the rhythm now. A tension in the pauses, a second glance at every sound from the shore. Magellan and his men return. This time they do not come empty-handed. A procession forms along the beach, crosses carried with ceremony, a small altar wrapped in linen. One of the white-robed men, their priest, speaks loudly, though few understand the words. A man stands beside him, translating as best he can. The message is clear enough. They come not only as explorers, but as bearers of a new belief. A God who walks nailed to wood. A God of water and sky and eternal reward. A God who sees, who judges, who commands. Humabon listens. He nods. He kneels. The gesture ripples through the crowd. Some follow. Some hesitate. Some remain standing, unsure of what this means. The cross is planted in the sand. A mass is held. Bread is lifted, wine poured. The priest's voice trembles with heat and effort. The sailors bow their heads. The locals mimic the movement, some out of respect, others out of politeness, a few out of something else, something that feels like suspicion. You watch from a distance, near the edge of the trees. The cross is on the ship, rocking gently beneath unfamiliar stars. And beyond that, on the far shore, Lapu-Lapu waits.
The water is shallow. It pulls back from the sand in slow retreat, revealing a stretch of coral-studded shoreline. The morning is not loud. The birds do not call. The sky, streaked with red and pale gold, is still decided what kind of day it will be. A soft wind moves the palm fronds, and the boats push quietly toward the beach. You are in one of them. The rowers move without speaking, oars dipping in unison. Magellan stands at the bow, armor wrapped in cloth to protect it from salt. He wears a helmet, polished but dented in places. His jaw is set, not angry, not triumphant, just determined in a way that has grown more brittle over time. Behind him, the other men whisper. Some are nervous, some are still chewing breakfast. Few understand why this is necessary. Lapu-Lapu is not a king, not even a rival in the usual sense, just a chieftain on a distant island, unconvinced by crosses and flags, a man who did not bow, a name now carried toward violence. The water grows too shallow for the boat. Magellan steps over the side. The water reaches his knees. You follow. Your boots fill with warm salt water. Coral scratches your soles. The sand is soft, sucking at your heels. You move slowly, armor heavy, musket slung, and sword at your side. The others do the same. Some stumble, some mutter under their breath. The wind brings no scent, only the quiet slap of water and the dry scent of distant fires. Ahead, the beach slopes upward. Figures appear, shapes in the mist. Barefoot, spear in hand, faces unreadable. They do not run, they do not hide, they wait. You pause for a moment, surprised. No battle cry, no scattered resistance, just stillness. Then someone shouts. It begins. It is not a clash. There is no thunder, no charge, no great line drawn. Just slow movement, both sides watching, waiting, adjusting. The meant for solid ground is suddenly clumsy, heavy, out of place. Magellan gives orders. His voice is firm, but not loud. The men spread slightly. They raise muskets, but the powder is damp. The smoke rises in weak ribbons. The few shots that fire crackle like dry twigs, not roars, but coughs, and then silence again. Across the beach, the islanders stand motionless for a moment. Then they move, quickly. Not wildly, but with purpose. They do not wear armor. They do not carry guns. Only spears, blades, and bows shaped by years of watching the sea and sky. They know the terrain. They know where the coral waits, just beneath the water. They know where to step. The first wave comes fast. Spears arc through the air, not wildly, but aimed. A soldier falls beside you. Another stumbles backward, crying out. You raise your sword, but you do not see where the threat is. The smoke, the light, the noise, it all folds into one moment of confusion. Magellan does not retreat. He wades farther in, calling to his men, gesturing for them to stand firm. His blade is drawn, its tip low. He parries once, then again. A third blow comes. He turns. He slips. The water pulls. A spear catches him near the leg, another at the shoulder. He stumbles. You do not hear him cry out. He fights still, but slower now, surrounded, not swarmed, just encircled. The men around him hold their distance, not charging, not frenzied, just waiting, like fishermen who know when to pull the net closed. And then he is down. He does not fall dramatically. He does not shout defiance. He simply lowers, as though sinking into the tide itself. The water takes his weight. The wet sand cradles him. His blade slips from his hand. The islanders pause. No cheers, no roar of victory, only breath, only the waves returning slowly over the shore. The Spaniards retreat, you retreat, back to the boats, back through the shallows. No one speaks. There is no order, only escape. From the safety of the sea, you look back. The beach is almost empty now. The sun is higher in the sky. The tide is rolling in. And where he fell, only the sea remains, gentle, slow, and completely indifferent.
The boats drift in silence. The oars do not splash. The men do not speak. Somewhere behind, smoke curls faintly above the trees of Mactan. But no one looks back anymore. Not really. Magellan is gone. Not captured. Not honored. Not buried. Just gone. Swallowed by the shoreline. Left behind on a beach where the sea comes in and goes out, just as it did before he ever arrived. He is not the first to die far from home. But somehow this death feels weightless, as if history simply exhaled and moved on. There is no plan now, no leader, no future drawn on a map. The men drift because there is nowhere else to go. Some will sail back to Cebu, some will sail farther still, others will never make it out of the archipelago. But the course has changed, not because of a grand defeat, but because of a refusal. Each grows quiet again. Now we'll leave the creaking ships and foreign maps behind for a while. Instead, let's turn to the quiet shores of Mactan. Before the sails appeared, before the clash of unfamiliar worlds. For a little while, we'll see things not through the eyes of explorers, but through those who watched the ships come in. This is the world of Lapu-Lapu, not the statue, not the hero carved in stone, but the man who rose with the sun, walked barefoot across the sand, and listened to the wind. The man who knew his land by heart, and chose, when the time came, not to bow. Let us drift into his story now, as the tide begins to rise.
Before the sails were spotted on the horizon, long before the sound of cannons, the clash of steel, or the names written into history, there was a place where time passed in tune with the tide. The island of Mactan, cradled in the warm shallows of the central Philippines, lay just east of Cebu, not yet burdened by maps or flags or conquest. It was a world where life moved slowly, not because it lacked meaning, but because everything had its place. Every rhythm was known.
The pull of the moon on the tide, the cycle of the fishing grounds, the way smoke curled into the evening sky from cooking fires woven into the trees. In the mornings, when the air was still soft and the light stretched lazily over the water, the people of Mactan would rise. The island's stilted homes, made of bamboo, nipa, and wood, perched lightly above the ground or water, designed to breathe with the heat. Children would stir, yawning into their palms as their parents set about the day's work. Men readied their small boats, banker, hollowed and balanced, with nets that had been repaired the night before. Women tended to the cooking fires, weaving palm fronds for mats or baskets, or walking to the shoreline to gather shellfish, hands rough from years of labor, yet graceful all the same. Food was simple, drawn from what was nearby. Fish grilled over flame, rice steamed in woven pouches, wild greens cooked in clay pots. Salt came not from distant trade, but from seawater left to dry under the sun. Coconut trees offered shade and sweetness. Nothing was wasted. Bones became tools, fibers became rope, stories became lessons. The island was alive not just with human hands, but with birdsong, insect buzz, and the distant splash of fish. Dogs barked at crabs on the sand. Goats wandered near the edges of the trees. Children played with sticks and shadows. And when the afternoon heat grew thick, the villagers rested in the shade, fanning themselves with woven leaves, listening to the sea. Social life was organized through kinship and loyalty. At the head of each community stood a datu, a chief not chosen by divine right or written law, but through strength, wisdom, and trust. These were leaders expected to protect their people, to provide in times of hunger, and to listen during moments of doubt. Beneath them were warriors, farmers, craftsmen, and traders. Elders were respected, and shamans, Babelan, held the power to interpret dreams and speak with spirits. Women, especially those with knowledge of healing and ritual, were often revered. Power was not absolute. It flowed, as the rivers did, through relationships.
Trade was constant. Though Mactan was small, it was never isolated. From island to island, boats criss-crossed the archipelago, bearing pots, wax, woven cloth, fish, pearls, and sometimes gold. These were exchanged for tools, beads, jars from China, iron blades from the south, or spices from the islands of the east. These exchanges didn't only move goods, they carried songs, dialects, beliefs, and names. To sail from one coast to another was not to enter the unknown, but to follow routes already traveled by ancestors. Spirituality was part of everything. The people of Mactan believed in anitos, spirits that dwelled in rocks, trees, rivers, and wind. Offerings were made to these unseen presences, a bit of food, a whispered plea, a careful song. When a storm raged or a harvest failed, it was not just misfortune, but a sign to be read, a balance to be restored. The world was not divided between sacred and secular. It was all sacred, all one body of life. At night, under the immense stretch of stars, the island grew quiet. Crickets chirped, and waves brushed the shore with lullaby rhythm. The island of Mactan, in those years before foreign eyes fell upon it, was not untouched by the wider world, but it was still whole, still itself, still dreaming in its own language. It was not waiting to be discovered. It was simply being. And it is from this stillness, this rooted life, that the story begins, not with a clash, not with a war,
but with a calm world that did not ask for change, a world that simply existed, quietly, until the sails appeared.
It began not with noise, but with something quieter, a shift in the breeze. A murmur passed between fishermen, a shape on the sea that did not belong. Far out across the water, in a place where only birds and clouds were expected, dark silhouettes moved against the blue. At first they were taken for distant squalls or mirages formed by the shimmer of the sun. But they grew closer, slowly, steadily, drawn by winds that had never before carried such things. The sails rose first, broad, square, and pale, taller than the palm trees, stiff as stone. Below them, wooden hulls carved deep into the sea, bearing scars and foreign flags. No canoe was ever so tall, no outrigger so heavy. The islanders watched, some from the beach, some from the edge of the mangroves, barely breathing. The elders gathered quickly, eyes shaded with experience. They had seen traders come from other islands, Borneans, Malays, even Chinese merchants with strange silks and carved boxes. But this was different. These were not boats of commerce. These were ships of another world. News traveled faster than the tide. Across the water in Cebu, Raja Humaban, the local ruler, had received these foreigners with cautious interest. Gifts had been exchanged, mirrors, bells, beads, bolts of cloth. The men in metal spoke in bursts, their voices strange and sharp, each sentence followed by wide gestures and hopeful smiles. Through gestures and the help of local interpreters, it became clear they had come from a land no one had heard of. They spoke of a king who ruled far away. They carried a wooden figure they said was a god, and they offered it with reverence. They asked for tribute, for alliance, and for conversion. The Raja, seeing opportunity, or perhaps sensing danger, accepted. There was a feast, a baptism, and the foreign captain stood smiling beside his hosts. But not all were convinced. Across the narrow waters in Mactan, Lapu-Lapu listened. He did not rush to judgment. He asked questions. He walked the shores, watched the sea, consulted with his elders. The offerings these strangers brought were impressive, but the demands hidden behind them were troubling. Allegiance to a distant king, a new god to replace the old spirits, a symbol carved from wood to take the place of the ancestors. He had no desire for war, but neither did he see cause to bend.
The people of Mactan were self-sufficient. They had their own crops, their own warriors, their own traditions. They did not need to bow to the king of Cebu, let alone to an emperor across oceans. Lapu-Lapu's council agreed. If these men came in peace, they would be watched. If they came with threats, they would be met with resistance.
So, when word arrived that the foreign captain, Magellan, had declared Lapu-Lapu a rebel, there was no surprise, only silence. In the eyes of the strangers, defiance was treason. A failure to submit was an act of war. To Magellan, who had crossed half the world for a king's glory and the spice of distant islands, this small show of resistance could not stand. He believed that a swift display of force would settle the matter, that these islanders, barefoot and spear-armed, could not possibly stand against guns, armor, and discipline. But Magellan did not understand the land. He did not understand its people. He did not understand that resistance here was not born from ambition, but from a deeper well of duty, to the land, to the ancestors, and to one another. In the days that followed, preparations were quiet but steady. Nets were pulled in early, spears were sharpened in the dusk, elders spoke in hushed tones by the fire. The Babilan watched the sky and read the wind. Chickens were offered, smoke carried messages, children were sent inland. The beaches, once places of laughter and play, became lines of defense. Lapu-Lapu did not raise his voice or beat his chest. He did not call for conquest. Instead, he walked from home to home, reminding his people not of glory, but of belonging. He spoke of the mangroves that fed them, the reefs that protected them, the trees that remembered their ancestors' hands. He spoke not of enemies, but of protection. For many, fear stirred quietly in the belly. These foreigners brought strange fire sticks and clanging metal. Their words are harsh, their eyes are unreadable. But Lapu-Lapu's calm was steadying. His presence reminded the people that the island had stood before and would stand again. And so they waited. Each morning they watched the sea. Each night they listened to the waves, until finally one dawn the sails returned, not to offer, but to take.
The tide was low the morning they came. The water had pulled back from the reef, revealing jagged coral and pools where small crabs darted between stones. The early sun had not yet burned away the mist, and the shore was quiet. Only the soft rustle of leaves and the hush of waves brushing against the beach. But across the narrow channel, movement stirred. The foreign ships had returned, anchored in deeper water where the reefs would not reach. And from them, smaller boats were lowered, heavy with armored men, long poles jutting from their sides, moving slowly toward the island. Lapu-Lapu stood already at the edge of the trees, waiting. He had risen before the light, said his quiet prayers, and walked barefoot through the damp grass to where his people had gathered. There were no horns, no war drums, just the silence of many hearts breathing together, watching the sea. The warriors of Mactan were not a professional army. They were fathers, brothers, fishermen, farmers. Their weapons were not forged for empire, but shaped from necessity. Bamboo spears hardened in fire, wooden shields, stones gathered from the shore. But they knew this land. They knew the tide, the reef, the currents that tugged at the ankles of those who did not belong. As the foreign boats reached the shallows, the invaders disembarked. Their armor clanked with each step. Their boots sank into sand. Muskets were hoisted. Orders barked.
But the sea betrayed them. The tide had not yet risen. The reef stretched far inland, and so, burdened by metal and marching in water up to their thighs, they waded, slowly, awkwardly, toward the shore. From the cover of trees and rock, the people of Mactan watched. Then, at Lapu-Lapu's signal, a hand raised in calm silence, they moved. It was not a charge, but a flow. The warriors emerged like the tide itself, swift and sudden. They came not in rigid formation, but with the grace of those who knew every step of the ground. Spears whistled through the air. Stones flew. Arrows found seams in armor. The invaders staggered. The battle did not roar. It thudded, hissed, and cracked. Magellan himself moved forward, trying to hold the line. He was tall, encased in armor, his sword raised against the sun. He fought as he had in Europe, confident, deliberate, expecting the enemy to part before him. But the sea tugged at his legs. The reef gave no footing. The muskets misfired or sank.
An arrow struck him in the leg. He stumbled. Then came the spears. The islanders did not wait for ceremony. They pressed forward, wave after wave. And in that shallow water, in the place between reef and beach, the captain fell. His sword dropped to the sea. His helmet rolled into the tide, and he did not rise again. The foreign men, stunned by the loss, pulled back, dragging what they could to their boats, shouting in fear, bleeding and broken. They did not return. Lapu-Lapu stood on the beach as the last of them vanished into the horizon. There was no cheer, no parades. The warriors did not loot, did not mock. They gathered their wounded, buried their dead, and returned to their homes. The body of the foreign captain was left where he fell, claimed by the tide, then the reef, then time. No monument was raised that day. No song was written. The villagers simply resumed their lives. The nets were repaired. The fires were lit. The tide, ever patient, came back in. But something had changed. Word spread, not just across the Visayas, but across the islands and oceans, that on a reef near Mactan a great captain had fallen, that an island had stood its ground, that a man with no crown, no flag, and no desire for empire had defended his people against the march of history. In time, the story faded into silence. Centuries passed. Colonizers came and went. Maps were drawn, redrawn, and renamed. Lapu-Lapu's name, for a long time, was nearly lost, reduced to rumor, buried in the margins of European chronicles. But in the memories of the people, in the lullabies sung at night, in the tales whispered around fires, he remained, not as a warrior drenched in blood, but as a protector. When his name returned to public memory, it returned not with fury, but with pride. He became a statue, a face on coins, a figure in textbooks. But more than that, he became a symbol, a reminder that even in the shadow of sails and steel, a fisherman with a spear standing on his own land could say, "No." Today, the reef where Magellan fell is a tourist stop. Boats circle the spot. Guides tell the story. But the sea keeps its secrets. The waves move as they always have, and if you listen closely, between the rush and retreat, you might hear it, the stillness that came after the battle. Not the stillness of fear, but the stillness of peace reclaimed, of land protected, of a man who stood quietly and did not move.
And so, as the tide returns to cover the footprints on that quiet shore, we let go of a story that did not end in glory, but in stillness. Ferdinand Magellan's journey was long, fragile, and unfinished. It crossed oceans, mapped the sky, and sought to bring one faith across many worlds. But on the morning he stepped into the shallows of Mactan, he found something he could not chart nor change. A people standing firm in their own land, unmoved by steel or sermon. There was no grand speech, no final charge, just the slow weight of wet armor, the sound of waves brushing against coral, and the quiet strength of refusal. Magellan did not fall to an army, but to the rhythm of a world that had always been its own. His name would echo in books, carved into monuments far from where he died. But on the shore itself, no stone was left, no flag remained. Only the memory of a morning, a boundary not crossed, and the hush of the sea. Thank you for drifting alongside me through this soft chapter of history. Not the conquest, but the space in between, the waiting, the mistranslations, the silence after the prayers have ended. And now, as the past grows dim and the present grows still, I hope the calm of those distant islands lingers with you. Let your breath ease, let your thoughts slow, like the water smoothing over sand. Sleep, if it comes, may find you gently, carried like a canoe along a quiet shore. Until next time, may the quiet rhythms of the past keep you company through the dark and into peace.